I received the call on Wednesday morning, telling me my brother was dead. It was suicide, apparently. He hadn't shown up to work for a while, and eventually one of his colleagues had gone round to check on him. They found his door unlocked and him sat at his kitchen table. They say he had driven a kitchen knife up into his neck. I listened to the phone call, feeling numb. An hour later I was stood in front of the covered table in the morgue. They pulled the sheet back and I mumbled that yes, this was my brother Scott. The wound on his neck had been washed out. It looked insignificant, no more than a scratch. "I'm sorry," I said to the corpse. I should have. The attendant said something along the lines of it wasn't my fault, but I barely heard him. I was thinking back to the day before. The last time I had seen him alive. I knocked on his door, the curtain on his front window shifted, and a few seconds later the door opened slightly. "James? Is that you?" "Obviously it's me. Let me in." I was yanked inside, and the door was slammed and bolted. Scott looked terrible. His hair and beard were a tangled mess and he had lost a substantial amount of weight. He was dressed in old tatty clothes, so he resembled a scarecrow, and he was giving off an unpleasant smell like he hadn't washed in weeks. I started to ask him how he was and he bundled past me into his living room, barely acknowledging I was still there. I followed him in as he collapsed down onto the sofa. Despite the state of himself, the house looked pretty neat. So neat, in fact, it looked like no one had been living there at all. There seemed to be a layer of dust on everything like it hadn't been moved in a while. The one part of the room that looked disordered was the small area around where my brother was sat. Old pens and scraps of paper were strewn about in an almost perfect semicircle a few inches round the sofa. I caught on pretty quickly that Scott hadn't moved from that spot for a long time. I started talking as he picked up one of the pens and started scribbling on one of the pieces of paper, balancing it on his knee. "So, what's been going on? Mom said you haven't been answering your phone. She's been worried." He looked up from the paper, but his hand kept moving, scrawling down various words. "Me? I'm fine. Not so good. Both, really, I guess." He talked quickly, with a slightly manic expression on his face. "Been writing. It's been weird, to be honest." He looked back down at the page. Yeah, I see that." I noticed on a shelf in the corner were various little pill boxes. I walked over and looked through them. "Sertraline, diazepam. Have you been taking your pills? Maybe you should talk to your doctor." "I have been, actually. Taking the pills." I turned to look at him again. He was looking at me with a much calmer expression, almost normal. It was them that made me, he paused to shuffle through the papers. "See, them. W.